CPU prices are at the lowest I've actually ever seen it for something really good like a Ryzen 5000 CPU. Take a look at this Ryzen 5600 at $209. This used to be over $300. So today I'm going to tell you which CPUs you should buy, what you should know about new ones coming out. Remember to watch until the end of the video because you're not going to believe the price of this monster 16-core CPU. It's literally a crazy price. And we're also going to talk about CPU bottlenecking and why you should consider a faster CPU, especially with really fast GPUs coming out. So let's get started. Alright guys, Tiago here with Classical Technology. You know the deal. Smash like button, subscribe. Every time you do, CPUs get cheaper. See, I said it once, I think last year, and they are much cheaper. So lately, we've been so hyper-focused on the GPU. That's literally all we talk about, all people want to hear. Now that GPU prices have sort of settled down a little bit, we're seeing a lot of availability across the board of, pretty good GPUs that before were completely sold out, or you had to pay like scalper pricing to even get a chance at getting the GPU. When that dust settled, I just took a look today at CPU prices and they have been coming down during the last few months, but now they're at the lowest point that I've really ever have seen them. Now, this is going to be mainly, we're going to talk about Ryzen 5000. Part of the reason why Ryzen 5000 is so great is that, well, Intel was still sleeping. We're not talking about 12th generation yet. Ryzen 5000 finally brought at certainly a decent price. It was a little bit more expensive than we would have liked when it was released. It finally brought really high IPC sort of clock rates for gaming together with really nice high core count CPUs. In the past, you either had to choose a really good gaming CPU like a 4 or 6 or 8 core that would do single core tasks a lot better, if you want to do a game or something like that, or you would have to choose a multi-threaded CPU like an 18 core like the 10980XE. It was okay for gaming, but really too expensive, more meant for content creation and things like that. But Ryzen 5000 showed us that we could have both a high core count CPU, an efficient CPU, as well as very fast gaming performance. When they first came out, they certainly were perpetually sold out. It was difficult to get CPUs. It wasn't anywhere near as bad as we saw with the GPU shortages. Certainly it was pretty bad. So which CPUs should you be looking to buy? In my opinion, if you're doing sort of a more entry-level or budget system, if you can stretch your budget a little bit more than normally would be considered budget, the 5600X is really good for the price that it is now. Now, if you're lucky enough to live near a Micro Center, you'll catch it at $209. Sometimes you can even get a discount if you buy a motherboard. But if you don't live near a Micro Center, you can check out Amazon. The price is going to be a little bit more there, but it's still much cheaper than the previous $299 MSRP. For a while, it was even more than that when people were reselling it on the market. Now, keep in mind this is a good recommendation, but it's not ideal in 2022 because it is a 6-core CPU. Ideally, you would say that maybe an 8-core or above would be better just to future-proof yourself with certain games. For example, even some of the really wide open games like Battlefield, I guess not the newest one, nobody's playing that, but the previous Battlefields, if you're playing with a massive amount of players, a 6-core CPU can certainly start to get a little bit choked up. You're going to need something with a little more performance, but I still think at this price, if you just want a CPU for really good gaming in general, I still think you can't really go wrong with a 6-core CPU. It's not ideal. It's nicer to have more cores, of course, but for $209, if you get it for that price, I think it's pretty impressive what it can do. And in a lot of games, it's actually going to match the much more expensive CPUs as well, especially games that really don't take advantage of multi-threaded performance, which, let's be honest, most games don't. A couple definitely are starting to. It definitely helps your system performance if you're doing content creation and different tasks like that. But in general, you just want a CPU that's going to be able to hit those high frame rates, especially if you're doing esports or something like that. 5600X, fantastic. Another huge benefit, in my opinion, you can put it in literally any system. It only has like a 65 watt TDP, and it's one of the only Ryzen CPUs you can get nowadays that actually comes with an integrated cooler. Now, it's going to be the stock AMD cooler, and it does a fine enough job at cooling the CPU. If you're on a budget, that's where you can definitely save save some money. So definitely the 5600X at this pricing, really attractive. And don't forget, you can put it in a plethora of different motherboards. Doesn't have to be an X570. You can get some older motherboards that will also support Ryzen 5000. Just make sure, like always, your BIOS is the latest one, because some of the earlier boards that were meant for Ryzen 3000 may not work out of the box until they get that BIOS update. Now, if you do want to stay on the Intel side, if you want to take advantage of all the new benefits that the 12th generation will bring, such as possibly DDR5 and PCIe Generation 5, those really are kind of diminishing returns at this point. They're going to be more expensive in general, and you're not really going to be able to take advantage of the performance until those technologies mature down the road. Something like the 12400 or the 12600K will be close to price of the 5600X. Maybe the 12600K might be a little more, but you are going to get better performance with that CPU. It's going to be almost an entirely different class of CPU competing with higher end CPUs from AMD. But for now, if you do want to go Intel, that's definitely something else to take a look at. Going up the product stack, the next one you're going to see is the 5700G. Now, the big interest here is going to be it's going to have integrated graphics, which of course you generally want to pair a nice GPU if you're doing gaming or something like that. But integrated graphics, even for myself, have really come in handy a lot of times. For example, let's say if you're diagnosing a problem with your system, you don't want to install the graphics card yet, or it's a problem with the graphics card itself, you want to isolate it from the motherboard, from the RAM and the memory, whatever it may be. It's definitely very practical. I think every system should have integrated graphics, if nothing else, but to be able to let you diagnose the system separately from a graphics card. Now, of course, some people will want to play on that integrated graphics if they can't get a graphics card, especially with the current situation of them being so expensive. This is certainly one to look at. It will come with a cooler. It is 8 cores, but generally if you do want a little bit more performance, maybe recommend it to step up to the 5800X. And while I think the 5800X does pack a lot of performance for $300, it's going to be 8 core, 16 thread. Certainly, it's had a little controversy, myself included. I made a video on it. The particular one that I had, it was an earlier sample, ran really hot regardless of settings, regardless of cooling situations, and a lot of people chimed in and actually had similar experiences. Some people, their chip ran really cool, so as far as I know, it probably just was due to maybe a certain batch or certain silicon. Nothing against the 5800X. I mean, it's an 8-core CPU packed into, a small area, so it makes sense that much power is really going to heat up that much more. If you can skip this one, however, and make your way towards the 5900X, I think you're going to be a lot happier. It's going to be generally a much higher performing CPU. It may even, ironically, run cooler in many cases, even if it is a 12-core CPU, and you're going to have those multi-threaded performance. And back when these CPUs first came out, testing showed that this was one of the best gaming CPUs out of the entire Ryzen lineup, and of course it handedly beat Intel at the time. Only Intel 12th generation was really able to keep up with this. I would say the Intel competition, 12700K, certainly if you want to jump into that ecosystem, not bad at all, but at least here at Micro Center, $399 for this CPU. Very impressive for a 12-core CPU. And remember, this is not going to come with a stock cooler, so you're going to want to throw most likely an AIO or a very high-end air cooler like a Noctua or a Be Quiet air cooler, something that's going to keep this guy nice and cool and controlled, even though it doesn't typically run extremely hot like off the charts like maybe a 12900K. Certainly it's not a power sipping CPU either, so you definitely want to take care to handle whatever performance you're going to be presented with. But $399 is a spectacular price for this CPU. It's really the cheapest that I've seen, and it's only really eclipsed by the 16-core 5950X. Especially here, it's $549. Even on Amazon, you get it for under $600. This CPU originally was around $750. So little by little, we saw it on sale, maybe go down to like $650 or something like that. This is the first time that I've really seen it near the $500 sort of level. So This is a massive, massive CPU for the price. Of course, it's been out for a while now. The reason why these prices are so low, first, it's going to be Intel pushing the competition. A lot of people did want to try Intel 12th generation. Certainly a lot of interesting things there. DDR5 enthusiasts really love that sort of bleeding edge of technology. And the Intel pricing actually wasn't really that bad compared to previous pricing schematics, especially compared to Ryzen 5000. These were expensive CPUs when they came out. $300 for a 6-core for the 5600X, definitely expensive. $209 like it is now, that's much more like it, much more what these prices should be. So competition certainly pushed it down, and not to mention that these chips have been out for a while now. Pretty much they coincided with the RTX 3000 series. And another major point that you should note, by the end of the year, we're definitely going to be expecting another refresh of AMD CPUs, and this time it's not going to be a simple update or just a refresh. It's going to be probably a whole new architecture. With that in mind, you're not going to be able to drop that into the current X570 platform. Alright guys, so let me know what you think. Are you finally happy that CPU prices are coming down back to really where they should have started? So hopefully next generation is even better priced, and we see even increasing performance that will not only keep these prices cheaper, even better deals for people that want a better CPU but not have to spend outrageous amounts to get it. Remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.